2022. We'll begin our meeting with an invocation or a thought from Commissioner Lunt, followed which will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Barker. Commissioner Lunt.
Our Father in heaven, we're very grateful for the chance we have to be here tonight to meet as a planning commission and to discuss the needs of our city. We're grateful for those who serve and those who bring input to our meetings, and ask you to bless as we look forward to the future of our city, that we will be able to know how to best plan and the things that will best serve those around us. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I'm just going to pledge allegiance after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll make note that Commissioner Mancaro and Mason are excused. Commissioner Webb is joining us via Zoom. I'll read our opening statement. Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be opened for others to speak. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. Any material that are displayed or referenced, e.g. pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be left with the commission. Speakers are required to have signed in at the door and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address the commission from the podium or microphone and shall address all comments to the Public Planning Commission. And please silence your phones. Do we have any ex parte communications on or conflicts of interest on the agenda tonight? Anyone? All right. Do we have any public online with us?
Nope.
All right, we'll go ahead and skip public comment as well. We don't have any here other than the applicant. I guess unless you'd like to say something. Okay. It's proposed. We've had discussion to move item 7 up front, so our one applicant here tonight doesn't have to wait through the other items. Could I ask for a motion to amend the agenda tonight?
I'll make the motion. We amend the agenda tonight and move item 7 up to the first at the beginning.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll begin tonight with our legislative item number 7, Zone Map Amendment 2021-06. This is a public hearing. It is consideration and recommendation on a legislative application to rezone property for land located approximately 2671 North, 400 East, from Civic C to Community Commercial Downtown. Presenter is Brandon Bell. Brandon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair of the Commission. John, could you pull up Exhibit B and go to page 3 of that, which is attachment A to Exhibit B? It'd be helpful to refer to that during my comments. So again, this is a proposed rezone from the Civic Zone to Community Commercial Downtown. We did mail out notices on this, and we sent out actually a second notice that's correcting that at a prior time, the property that's being rezoned was RE20, and it's been rezoned since then, and so now it's being proposed to be rezoned again. Currently it's Civic. The approximate area for the property proposed to be rezoned is about 1.1 acres. And then I'm going to go ahead and read the decision type statement, since this is our first legislative matter. When the city is considering a legislative matter, the Planning Commission is acting as a recommending body to the City Council. The City has wide discretion in taking legislative action. Examples of legislative actions are general plan, zoning map, and land use text amendments. Legislative actions require that the planning commission give a recommendation to the city council. Typically, the criteria for making a decision related to a legislative matter require compatibility with the general plan and existing codes. So the applicant's requesting the zone change from civic to community commercial downtown. The applicant has also had a subdivision that was previously approved to add the same property that's being proposed to rezone to some existing parcels that they own. We have one of our guidelines is that the property lines match up with the zoning boundary, zoning district boundary lines. And so this will actually bring the subdivision and the rezoning into conformity with the boundaries in both subdivision and parcels and the zoning boundaries into conformity with one another if it is approved. And so the proposed rezone ordinance as it is written makes the rezone of the property subject to the recording of the approved subdivision, so that once that's recorded, both the if the zoning rezone is approved, that they'll both have the same property line or the same lines of boundaries of parcels and have all of the parcels in the same completely in one zone. So I'm going to go through the general guidelines related to these, which these come from an appendix to our general plan. The first guideline is that a definite edge should be established between the types of uses. And just real quickly, if you can see in red on the western portion, I guess the left portion of this document, this is the subdivision that was recently approved, and so we use this as the exhibit for the rezone boundary. That piece of property is going to be added once the subdivision is recorded to what's shown as lot 1, which currently is actually 2 parcels. Those 2 parcels and then this piece of property will be all combined into 1 parcel. And so then if the rezone is approved, they'll all have the community commercial downtown zone. So the proposed zone change will expand one zone slightly where it borders another zone, but the boundary between the 2 zones already exists. This action simply proposes a slight change in location to that boundary. No change in use will occur, though an expansion of an existing commercial use is proposed. There's a building that is proposed to be expanded, and then the area that's actually being proposed to be rezoned is the site plan indicates that it would be a parking lot. So the next guideline is that zoning should reflect the existing use of the property to the greatest extent possible, unless the area is in transition or is in conflict with the general plan. Staff comment on this is that the proposed zone change will facilitate the expansion of an existing use, which will be addressed in a little bit more detail later, and the abandonment of the former public works building site, along with the approval of the subdivision in the area and the recent another subdivision besides this and the recent road expansion are considered as factors contributing to the transition in this area. The next guideline is that where possible, properties which face each other across a local street should be the same or a similar zone. Collector and arterial roads may be sufficient buffers to warrant different zones. Staff comment is that the potential zone change if approved will change the zone boundary such that the zone will be the same on both sides of the street in the area where the rezone of this property is located. So to the south of this property is the Lee's property, and it already has the community commercial downtown zone. And so this will make it more consistent in this area where it's always the same across the street. The next guideline is that zoning boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments, i.e. placing the lot in 2 separate zones. The logical boundaries should be redrawn to follow property or established geographical lines. This staff comment is that this rezone will ensure that the boundaries of the community commercial downtown zone follow the property line of the recently approved subdivision for the property that has yet to be recorded, so that the entirety of the lot will fall within a single zone. There are a few additional commercial guidelines. The first is that generally commercial zones should be located along Washington Boulevard and 2700 North Streets, avoiding local streets which serve residential zones. Access to commercial zones should avoid local streets within residential zones. The staff comment is that the proposed zone change is redeveloping currently unused property and will facilitate the expansion of the commercial use along Washington Boulevard. The additional access gain will not use a local street within a residential zone. There are no immediately adjacent residential properties on the west side of Washington along Pleasant View Drive. There are maybe a few hundred feet to the west, but not adjacent to it. The next guideline is adhere to the general plan recommendations for the downtown and Southtown. Staff comment is that the proposed business expansion does not go contrary to the general plan recommendation for this area. The next guideline is that if compatible with the general plan, existing businesses on Collector and Arterials should be allowed to expand while providing an adequate buffer with adjacent residential zones. Staff comment on this guideline is that the proposed rezone is exactly the situation that is contemplated in this guideline, a business expansion along an arterial within the city. Neither the building and parking expansion nor the rezone will immediately impact the residential properties in the area. Staff is of the opinion that there is a sufficient buffer from residential properties, and this type of proposed rezone, which includes a building expansion, is exactly the situation that this guideline is written for. Next guideline is that encourage commercial uses to be developed with focus towards walkable streets, with buildings approaching the sidewalk rather than as a standard strip commercial with parking adjacent to the road. Staff comment on this guideline is that the location of the majority of the building is already in place. The parking lot is in this case behind the building, with the building closer to the street than the parking lot, and the unbuilt portion of the building will also be in front of the parking closer to the street than the parking lot. Another guideline is to consider development agreements to assure high quality development. Staff comment is that staff's view is that no development agreement is proposed or considered according to staff's view to be necessary for this. And then the final guideline is promote mixed use developments. Staff comment is simply that this is a building and parking lot expansion for an existing use, which an earlier guideline stated should be permitted for existing businesses. No change of use or additional uses are proposed for this for this property. The proposed rezone it conforms to the North Ogden City General Plan. The general plan calls for this property to be developed as part of the downtown mixed use area and land use category. And it's that land use category is defined as an area with mixed use characteristics and includes grid type blocks where walkability is a primary focus of the area. And then I think that covers it for the general plan. The proposed rezone, given it's an existing business, is viewed by staff as not detracting from this goal for the area in the general plan, and site plan has been reviewed by the commission, has been determined to meet the applicable zoning requirements. Staff recommends that the planning commission conduct a public hearing and receive public comment, consider the general plan's rezoning guidelines, and make a recommendation to the city council. Staff recommends that the planning commission can find that this application is consistent with the general plan guidelines and that the rezone from civic zone to the community commercial downtown zone can be approved. I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission might have for myself.
I have, when I did get to rehash what you've done before, just to make sure it's clarified, you talked about the location of the building, walkable streets and the park and sidewalk.
Yeah.
The comments haven't mentioned nothing about the sidewalk. Is that something, I think the last meeting we discussed this?
It was discussed briefly. The sidewalk was required to go in as part of, I believe, the site plan and the subdivision. And that's the applicant submitted designs for that to go in.
I knew we discussed it, just couldn't remember what it was.
Yeah. For sure. Are there other questions the commission might have?
Any other questions? Thank you, Brandon. Is there anything the applicant would like to add? Okay. Well, being that this is a public hearing, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Public hearing is now open for zone map amendment 2021-6. If any public would like to make comment, please step up to the mic and do so, or raise your hand in Zoom, and we will invite you to comment.
Nobody on Zoom.
All right,
I move that we close the public hearing then, since we have no public.
we have a second.
Second.
We have a motion to close the public hearing in a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, discussion, recommendation, pretty straightforward.
Well done. Yeah. This looks like just cleaning up stuff.
I'll go ahead and make a recommendation that we pass on a positive recommendation to the city council that they approve the rezone of this property from the civic zone to the community commercial downtown zone.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
is Commissioner Webb with us?
No.
Well, I vote yes. All right. We will go back to our regularly scheduled agenda. Administrative item number 5, subdivision ordinance 2022-7, consideration and action on the administrative application for preliminary approval of the Rock Point Estates 3-lot subdivision located at approximately 3,500 north, 100 west. Presenter is Scott Hess, our planning director. Scott.
Thank you. And John, when you get there, can you bring up the preliminary plat exhibit?
Sorry, Zoom is yelling at me.
So this is a preliminary plat redo essentially, or it's being brought back to the planning commission for reconsideration. This previously received approval of the 2-lot subdivision. It's at the end of 3475 north. The 2 lots were on the west side of that road, and this is as part of or on the heels of an annexation request coming in, providing these 2 individual lots RE20 zoning designation. But you'll remember the first time we discussed this on the east side of 3475. If you jump across the road, there's a lot 3 now. There was a remainder triangle that's owned by Marriott Land or Marriott Land Company, and one of the recommendations from the Planning Commission at the time of approval was that an agreement be figured out between Marriott Land and Rick Scadden and George Evans on what happens with that remainder property. Well, this is the solution for the time being. There's enough room in there to provide 1 lot 3 lot under residential R110 zoning, which is what the zoning designation is on the right side or the east kind of north side of 3475 north. And then it gets a little bit more complicated on what the next lot to the north will eventually be lot 4, because you're right at the boundary line of North Ogden City and Pleasant View City. So to create lot 4 as 1 whole lot actually requires 2 city boundary changes to move a small amount of Pleasant View City in North Ogden and then vice versa on the top corner. So that request has been made by the applicant and will be addressed in its own 1-lot subdivision at the time that is complete. So right now, this satisfies the requirement of from the initial preliminary plat to have an agreement for what happens with the remainder of land with Marriott Land Company, as well as have the improvements and everything figured out for what is now a 3-lot subdivision, allowing the developer to submit improvement drawings and begin the roadway construction and the lots there, and ultimately we'll have a 3-lot subdivision. I spoke with the applicant. He had a family commitment tonight, was unable to attend the meeting, and felt like we could adequately address it. He didn't have any additional questions or anything. This is really just a cleanup, and because of the nature of preliminary plats moving towards final plats, even though those are administrative now, you don't see those as planning commissioners. One of the key elements of a preliminary plat that we're doing is we're vesting the total number of lots in a subdivision. So I would have been, they could have submitted lot 3 as its own 1-lot subdivision, but that's a little more kind of clunky than doing it this way. So this is a cleaner way of doing that. And then 3475 will be a dedicated road all the way up past that future lot 4, which would then come in as a one lot, single subdivision at that time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or discussion on this?
I'll clear up the question I have on the boundaries.
Entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we consider approval of the application for preliminary approval of Rock Point Estates, lot 3 lots located 3500 north, 100 west, under conditions of approval in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
I vote yes. All right, legislative item number 6. Draft of the 2022 Moderate Income Housing Plan updates. Public hearing. Consideration and recommendation on a legislative amendment to update North Ogden City's Moderate Income Housing Plan, a component of the general plan. Presenter is Scott Hess, our planning director. This is a public hearing for this item. Scott?
Thank you. We're going to continue to see this year over year, and would probably like to bring this a little bit earlier in the year, but Title 1112 cleanup pushed it back. And now we have time, but this needs to be done, approved by the council by October 1st. So we don't have a lot of time if the planning commission wants to see this again to reconsider it. But what happened in the legislative session at the beginning of 2022 is the state looking at the original Senate Bill 34 requirements, which would be kind of big update to the moderate income housing plan standards in 2019 for the first time for really like a decade, I would say. I mean, we've had this requirement for a long time, but in 2019, they did a carrot and stick approach that for any community that's required to do a moderate income housing plan, if they're not in compliance with the requirements, then their community is ineligible to receive federal and state transportation improvement program funds, which directly impacts road projects. For example, in North Ogden City, the road project Washington Boulevard from 2600 north up the hill was funded in a pretty major way by Wasatch Front Regional Council through a TIP grant that was applied for and approved 6 years ago. So this was an excellent carrot or stick approach by the state to say you will have this plan in place or you're not going to get state road funding, because all of the local jurisdictions rely on it at like a 9-to-1 ratio of funding for these major transportation resources. So we have been in compliance. In 2021, the state, I think, realized that the menu items weren't doing what they were hoping to do. So there's a rewrite essentially of those state eligible items to address moderate income housing. And so we're going to be reviewing staff's recommendation for those menu items that I think are applicable to North Ogden. And then the other piece is that we have to have an implementation plan that goes along with this. And we took language out of our previous moderate income housing plan and put it into an implementation table, just a really brief, simple one. There aren't any examples of these yet, so I think every community is likely grappling with how much detail should we do. I'm of the opinion that we should have less detail and something kind of specific that we can reach out and say after a year or 24 months we did or didn't accomplish this particular thing. But we have now the menu item, those pieces that we think are the implementation component, and how long staff assumes it should take for us to address that individual implementation item. And we'll send this off to the state, and hopefully that puts us in compliance. Where this is brand new legislation, if our plan is deemed like we need more information, basically, we would still likely have eligibility for those transportation funds, but we'd have to show that we're working on bringing this into compliance. I don't expect that'll be the case. I think that there's going to be many communities that have similar implementation plans to what we're doing. And then some of the larger cities like Salt Lake City or Park City is doing a lot to promote moderate income housing, just to provide workforce housing. They're going to have pages of implementation strategy stuff where we have a few lines of code and implementation. So that being said, I think that if we just roll down into the actual exhibit itself, John, I can show you what we have updated.
Need to grab that and pull it up.
I have a few numbers that I need to update. We have had building permits since last August, September timeframe that I need to roll into this. So we have more than the 6,665 residential units. These tables are still the tables, the income tables that the state had last year. Part of the state legislation was a commitment of funds to the Department of Workforce Services to help update this information. The state provides you with your community's income levels and what basically they say the number of units you should be providing. And this data was troubled, I guess is one way to say it. It wasn't very good data. I mean, if you really looked at it, there were, for instance, I have friends who are community development directors and planning directors in other communities, and I reached out to them asking them in one particular Salt Lake Valley community, the number of affordable units that the state's data said they needed to provide was more than the total number of units the city even had. So like we have 6,700 units, call it. It was saying you need to provide 7,000 units of affordable housing. So you either double your density or you need to somehow decrease the cost of every unit in your house, in your city, plus add a bunch.
I think it was increased crime so that the houses become affordable.
There you go. You're gonna tell Holiday City that that's what it needs. So beginning down a little bit further, John, I have it on page.
So
20 of
that table says it's gonna cost less in 2026 for housing than it did in 2009.
Yeah, and the other thing, if you read this data on page 18 of the total staff report, there's a green, red, and keep going. Which one do you want? There you go, that one. This is saying that we need to provide 41 affordable. Well, this says we have enough. This says we have 125 affordable units at 80% area median income, 60 at 50%, and 20 at 30% of area median income. Meaning that we are essentially meeting our demand. And I disagree with that. Not by a ton. I'm not saying that Ogden needs to provide 600 units or something like that of affordable housing, but I just know that we have really expensive housing stock in North Ogden. And so this, hopefully the new data will be available. They made a commitment that it was going to be available. I scrubbed the DWS website. I can't find where new charts and tables are, so I've left this in. But the next part we have addressed. So beginning with the housing goals, the red lines in the goal itself are actually the way the wording changes have changed. So this is down a little further, John, right there. So it used to say, rezone for densities necessary to assure the production of moderate income housing. The new language is rezone for densities necessary to facilitate the production of moderate income housing. So minor word changes. A lot of these things are leading more towards implementation. I know in this bullet specifically, the Utah League of Cities and Towns and many communities pushed back saying that we can rezone to whatever you want, and there's no guarantee that that will create affordable units. Some of the most expensive housing in Salt Lake City right now along 4th West, just down by West High, are very dense apartments that are extremely high rent because they have things like rooftop patios and rooftop swimming pools and infinity pools and stuff that it's just highly amenitized. So the density didn't produce the affordability because they just took that density and then crammed in a bunch of really expensive units into that project. So we talked about, what I talked about is the city's experiencing growth pressures. We've now spent the last year reviewing areas of the general plan future land use map, and we really did increase the areas in the city that are eligible for higher density in that southwest quadrant of the city specifically. And we're now being responsive to requests for rezones in those areas. For instance, the Cheney property that was applied for by Dan Birch on an annexation with a rezone request was supported by Planning Commission and approved by City Council. Majestic Views Townhomes rezone to R4 was recommended by Planning Commission, supported by the council. So we are following our land use map, which is encouraging, and I think that shows that we're going to, match this. So my implementation measures were, let's adopt the general plan future land use map. I gave us credit for that because it happened in the year of 2022. So I think that we should take credit for doing that work. And then we're working on the written plan update for the general plan itself, the text element. I've said that's probably a year out. And then market-driven rezone requests. As a city or as a planning commission, we're not in the driver's seat of bringing forward these rezones. And in some cases, areas that you might have thought were going to rezone to smaller lots, get requests to go to RE20, and you end up with 2 lots on 6 acres. And we can't tell a property owner, I guess we could, it's a legislative item, but we're not going to tell a property owner, no, you actually should do 10,000 or 8,000 square foot lots there instead of your 2 like dream parcels, right? So we will evaluate developers' response to increased density areas to provide new moderate income housing options, and I gave us 24 to 36 months. So let's just kind of wait and see what comes in. I don't know what else to put on there as far as implementing it, unless you think the planning commission should have should be marketing or pushing for moderate income housing to come into the city. So any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's good.
It's really simple. I should have said this before we started going through these, but minimum number for a community like North Ogden, where we don't have a fixed guideway transit station, that would be bus rapid transit like what's coming on Washington Boulevard and 25th Street in Ogden, or front runner or light rail. We have to choose 3 menu items to be in compliance. If we choose 5 menu items, then we are in a priority position for those state and federal transportation dollars. So I've attempted to put 5 in here. Having been, worked for the region, my guess is that priority will be some number of additional points on the application when you apply for federal funds. So it may or may not make or break a project, but having that priority position certainly is helpful, especially if it doesn't hurt us in, or lock us into doing something the city really isn't interested in doing. So I've shot for 5 menu items. So the next one was create or allow for and reduce regulations related to, and it used to say accessory dwelling units in residential zones. Now it says internal or detached. So they've just clarified both types of those accessory dwelling units. I would expect, maybe not in this legislative session, we'll see, but in one coming up, that the requirements around detached accessory dwelling units are likely going to come down and be, they're going to make it an obligation, or they're going to lower the difficulty in getting that done in cities, is my guess. So right now you have to have a 20,000 square foot or larger lot in North Ogden to get a detached accessory dwelling unit, like a mother-in-law apartment that sits outside of the house. And I could see them saying that number needs to be like 8,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet or something on the lot, which would open up significant portions of the city to doing a detached ADU.
Do you see them doing anything with setbacks, Scott, in that same mode?
They could, or say that you can't, maybe it would be that you can't like have additional setback requirements for ADUs that you don't for normal accessory buildings. I could see that. So then the city's only response would be that all buildings are going to be pulled further away from the property line, and instead of just align the 2 things. And personally, I can see it both ways. Like if you have a large shop and you've got a half-court basketball hoop in it, then it's possible that you're going to be playing music and be loud and obnoxious, more so in that thing than if it were a 1-bedroom mother-in-law apartment that's just another living quarters at 10 feet away from the property line. That one's to be seen. We'll see what happens, definitely. We don't have a lot of these, you know, we thought we would add 5 to 10 ADUs per year. It's probably more like between 1 and 5 that are actually coming in. I'm certain that we have a lot of non-permitted accessory dwelling units that were just like canning kitchens that have had a wall closed off and then they're being rental, you know, basement rentals. So, again, in the implementation on this one, I took credit for the city passing an ordinance allowing internal ADUs in all single family residential zones. And then we had originally, when we passed that, encouraged through the Facebook page, and I think maybe even North Ogden Connection, but this is a magazine article we could have, encouraging to homeowners the possibility to, one, construct ADUs, and also probably to say, hey, these are legal. If you had one that you previously built or were concerned was illegal, these are now permitted, and to make it legally accepted, all you need to do is apply for your business license. If you're renting it out, we'll come out and do a fire check and a building safety check on it. And it's kind of like no harm, no foul. You know, we're just accepting them as they've been constructed, so long as we don't think they're gonna burn down or hurt somebody. And then we will, as an implementation measure, process building permits, 5 to 10 ADUs per year being a realistic number of expected new ADUs in North Ogden annually. And I can't really think of another implementation measure we would do on this because we're in a pretty reactive position. You know, we could, as a city, look at requiring all new homes to be ADU ready. I think the building community would have a hard time, you know, eating that cost. If we said every new home with a basement has to have a basement entrance and be ready to go with laundry hookups and a kitchenette. You know, as a developer, Eric, that's an added cost. Like probably $10,000 to $15,000, depending on the configuration of the home, just in the concrete for the basement walkout, and then a 220 and the additional plumbing materials. And that's just to set up a home so that it's ready to go. That's not even, you know, building it out. So I can't think of another implementation measure we would take that's really, you know, going to force.
Yeah, the only thing along that lines would be is if you offered in the building permit process, hey, we have a $500 credit on your building permit if you show that your house is designed to be ADU ready. So then that qualifies you in this category. That's a way that we're promoting.
Yeah.
But it's not, you know, then it's an offer to them, which a lot of houses that are built could qualify for that. So that checks the box.
Right.
And we're offering a little discount on their permit to do that. So we can check the boxes. You know, that'd be a way to do it that way.
Yeah, that's a great.
I think Commissioner Thomas has advocated for higher property taxes. I'm just kidding.
You know, we have a,
Rack them up there.
so of our
You work for the county?
building permit, and this, and Eric, you know this as a developer, and I don't think everybody realizes that, but your building permit is actually a collection of many fees, right? So we say an average building permit in North Ogden is somewhere between $14,000 and $21,000, something like that, depending on if you're $400,000 small single family home or you're $1 million home on the hill, and it can range, it can go up from there. And you have impact fees for water, sewer, parks. We don't have transportation impact fees, and so
we do.
water, sewer, parks, transportation, and those are set fees. We can't reduce those fees. Those are like truth in taxation fees that are estimated to pay the true cost of the impact driven by them. And then you have the state 1% fee, plan check fee. So of all this money, right, we have this small window of dollars. Like we might not even have $500 wiggle room to say this is our like discretionary monies, and because those would be our plan check fees, we could reduce those. Gary's time, you know, planning department's time and review of building permits, but it's limited. But that's a great idea. I think we should bring that up. Because we can't really reduce, you can't reduce the impact fee without making that revenue up.
Well, or maybe, yeah, maybe what you do is, so we're not giving up dollars at a building permit stage either, is saying, if you design the house to accept an ADU, we will waive the plan check fee at the permit stage of doing the ADU. So then when they come in, they can do that, they check the box, doesn't cost anybody any money. But then when they have to come in to get their permit to finish the basement, I mean,
Yeah,
our permit process, you don't need to get another permit to finish your basement, it's kind of all included, but
yeah,
we promote that and say, hey, we'll waive any plan check fee or whatever when you do want to do an ADU.
and you
Or
can-
a business license at the ADU stage or whatever, something we're waiving in the future,
yeah,
but we're able to check a box now to meet a category.
and I'm sorry to joke about it, because it is a good idea, and in fact, like Scott said, if you, or what you just suggested, if you just said, hey, we're gonna treat them the same way we do basements, which is it's already included in the other fee. It's there, we'll come out, we'll do we'll do these kinds of things, and I think that's so.
Because if we look at it, and say, hey, we're, because they may need to, hey, we need it, a walkout basement or exterior, they need, oh, hey, if we add a door to this as a walkout, we can check that box if somebody wants to do it. Rarely it may happen, but the houses that are already that way anyway, they say, oh, yeah, well, yeah, mark that down. Then in one of these future reports, we can say, hey, we got 50 homes designed, built with ADU compliant, readiness or whatever. So we're kind of promoting, they can see we're doing some kind of effort when in reality, everybody who builds a house with a walkout basement has a door that goes outside, they pretty much, and those houses usually have kitchens designed, they pretty much check all the boxes, but all it's doing is helping us to check another box that helps us in compliance here or in whatever.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, item G previously said encourage higher density or moderate income residential development near major transit investment corridors. I grab onto this one. Technically, we don't have a major transit investment corridor. That's a defined term by the state, meaning light rail, front runner, or bus rapid transit. And we're not even planned to have one in the next 30 years. So our bus lines that we've got are pretty much what we have. But again, I grabbed onto this, the new language would amend land use regulations to allow for higher density new moderate income housing in commercial or mixed use zones near major transit investment corridors. I think that our work on the general plan to make that southwest quadrant of the city mixed use and more multifamily is right in line with this, especially along Washington Boulevard, which is our highest travel corridor and where our bus line runs up and down. So they might say, no, you don't have a transit investment corridor, but we're at least thinking about the alignment of transportation access and the housing choices that, should go with those things.
When you say it's 30 years out, sorry, I'm talking more than usual, but because this is the 30 years, the one where they plan the 15-minute bus service. So it's not the dedicated lane, but
So
it'll be much more consistent.
Yeah, the regional transportation plan from Wasatch Regional Council does have bus upgrades and improvements that would be operational in nature. So you'd have better bus stops with maybe some shelters, and then 15-minute service is planned pretty much for all.
Have you noticed how frequent the bus stops are on Washington? I was looking at them the other day in North Ogden. There's literally some that are 500 feet apart.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like, man, or on a whole block, there's one in this corner and one in the next corner. That kind of seems like a lot of bus stops.
It's true.
We do actually have a little bit of a population of the community that relies on buses. So I've got a friend who's blind who lives
Yeah.
over in Sunbrook. And there's several other people who rely on them that's actually a really nice thing, because for him, that 500 feet is a big deal. I mean, now that he knows it, it's not, but when he first moved here, being able to go to that bus stop and the Maverick on his side of the street is huge for him. Because he can get almost anything he really needs without crossing the street. It's weird but if you watch around the city, there's more and more people who are visually, have a sight disability.
Well, and I agree, they're handy. I'm just like, man, somebody who's at every stop is go 100 feet stop, go 100 feet stop. And some of them are the old ones that they've never replaced that are like on the side of the road that has no sidewalk. It's a field and it's like, I don't know if anybody's ever even been to that bus stop.
Our implementation measure on this one, our general plan language already focuses on medium density housing in close proximity to UTA routes, so that's complete, we've done that. We have approximately 600 entitled units expected to file for building permit in the next 12 to 36 months. This is Village of Providence Point, 400 units of apartments, and Cooperstown, 160 apartments, if that project works everything out with Ogden City. So right there on Washington Boulevard, within easy walking distance, is 560 units. And then half of all new units to be located within a quarter mile. So we're assuming that half of all of the new multifamily units will be located within a quarter mile of major bus routes and all within a half a mile of a bus line. And that's that area, that southwest quadrant of the city. Essentially, all of that is within half a mile of Washington Boulevard, depending on whether you're as the bird, crow flies, or whether you have to go around the street network. But that southwest quadrant of the city is really good close proximity. And we've given 12 to 24 months, given the interest in that area of the city and the fact that you have folks who are actively selling and marketing their land, that I would expect we start to see entitlement plans coming up on that. So this is a bit of a stretch goal, and the state may make some of these inroads for the communities, but again, my guess is the state's going to see a community like North Ogden being proactive in showing 5 of these and not come down and say, for technical reasons of not having a major transit corridor, will make you ineligible for this. So, questions?
No.
Okay. Next is item J, said implement zoning incentives for moderate income units in new developments. Preserve existing moderate income housing. So this is now implement zoning incentives just for moderate income housing in new developments. We're looking at developing code language to permit zoning incentives for low to moderate income units, including density trade-offs for open space preservation. And maybe this is aspirational to me, but when we talked about the general plan land use map and exchanging a doubling of density for 30% open space preservation, so you're moving from RA 20 to 10,000 square foot lots, or I think the best current example is Century Farm Subdivision with John Hanson Group, putting 34 units of 4,000 square foot lot units in there in exchange for that 1 acre park that we did. And while those houses will be expensive, they'll be probably the least expensive single family homes in North Ogden when they're constructed, at least from a brand new standpoint. So I think we should attempt to, with the Planning Commission's help, codify that as a policy, not as like something to be negotiated with every project, but that just says if you want to rezone and double your density, you're going to give up 30% of your open space. And then we don't have to do a development agreement every time. It just is what the code requires. And then the other is that we're estimating over the next year, staff will develop code language to permit shortened development approval timelines for densities greater than 6 units per acre. So if you're Majestic Views, townhomes, you're in an R4 area, it's an extension of a project. It makes excellent sense to do something like that. Attempt to figure out how to fast track those types of projects or make them, reduce the burden to them so they get to market more quickly. Because in every development, time is a huge part of every developer's, factoring when they're doing this. And if we can shorten that time frame, and if you're holding rezones up, not holding them up, but if rezones take a year to get through, there's a lot of developers that would walk well before that. They would just eat their non-refundable earnest money and move on to the next project that they know they can get going 3 months and not a year. Thoughts on that? And then the very last one, reduce, waive, or eliminate impact fees related to moderate income housing. And this one, we said, we have a limited ability to reduce impact fees without making up lost revenues. But we can review the consolidated fee schedule for our standard building fees to look for potential reductions if you're bringing in moderate income housing. And I'd like to, in the next 6 months, meet with the development community to talk about options for subsidized housing in single and multifamily projects. The biggest part of this entire conversation to me that's missing is that it's putting the burden on local communities to figure out what's really a market-based problem. They're saying, local community, you write a moderate income housing plan that's going to bring moderate income housing to your city. And the tools that we have to do that are increase density and reduce developers' fees. And to do those two things, if they bring us moderate income housing, is the way I look at it, as opposed to the flip side of that conversation, which would be development community. If you want to develop X type of project, then you need to figure out your own low-income housing tax credits or your own subsidies on a certain number of these units. And maybe that trade-off is will reduce the land value for homeowners who qualify at a certain income level when they purchase their homes. They get it at a reduced rate, but really what that is, it's an offset to the other areas. I mean, someone's got to make up that lost revenue somewhere. But I think that we're not developers. We don't build our community. Developers build your community and you accept those public improvements. And it's certainly something that you work together with them on, but I think that we need to figure out with the development community, what would it take from you from an increased density standpoint or a fee reduction standpoint or another incentive component, how could you provide housing that is at 80% of area median income and find out. And we have a way to get in front of the Home Builders Association. We've met with them on other issues. So I think that group could really be probably a helpful place to have a conversation, maybe invite some other cities to come and voice their, or just be there to listen to the conversation and see what the development community has thought of. Or just require every house to be built within 80 years. Which isn't what everybody wants, I understand. So those are our 5 that I'm recommending. There are, I think, 23 menu items. I believe one of the attachments that I sent you was the House Bill 462 affordability amendments. This is the Utah League of Cities and Towns white paper on this, talking about what our requirements are and all of those menu items. Some of the menu items, we used to think about figure out how to subsidize staff's housing. We don't have the budget to do that as North Ogden City, and we don't have that kind of tax-based revenue that's coming in. So some of those things are just taken right off the table. And then the other ones, like housing cooperatives, I think there's some really interesting ideas out there, but it would be difficult for staff to try to figure out how to start like a housing cooperative or housing collective in North Ogden, especially if the public doesn't want it or we're not getting asked for it by developers. So these were what I thought were probably the most practical of those elements, and happy to have this, with any comments, come back to the Planning Commission, or we can take that I think item E, Eric, the idea about waiving plan check fees at building permit if an ADU is done in the future or ready to go is a great suggestion, and then we can move this forward to the City Council.
Good. Any questions? You guys got it all memorized? Word for word. Okay.
What the digest.
You've done good, but that's good. You made that effort, and remember when we started doing that? Has it been 2 years ago? We did it the first time.
Maybe 3, but it was,
This is wild.
you can even just see
We had our little committee to talk about
yeah.
what the heck moderate income housing was in North Ogden.
Well, and I think this is one of the things that's been important, like this timeline and how it's measured, is huge, right? Like this just makes the whole thing readable. Because someone can go through and say, oh, this is the goals, this is how the city's gonna do it.
Yeah.
Way better than the first version, way better.
This would be good to follow.
Okay. Well, do we have a recommendation for,
It is a public hearing.
oh, yes. The public hearing is now open for this moderate income housing updates to the draft of 2022. If you'd like to address this, please do so. Do we have anybody online?
Not that I last saw.
Okay.
No, we closed the public hearing.
I'll second
We have a
that.
motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now recommendation, city council.
Okay, I'll make a motion. We recommend to the city council the moderate income housing plan updates and public and legislation amendment to North Island City moderate income housing plan be approved. Did I miss anything? That's a long deal.
I would just say if you, with the amended implementation elements as discussed.
Oh, yeah. What he said.
Okay, I got it.
I wouldn't have found that nice of a way to say it.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Hunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson? Yes. I vote yes. All right. We have no public. Any remarks from planning commissioners? How about John?
Just a reminder, the employee party is in September. So watch your emails for that.
Okay.
There'll be another barbecue and fun and games and.
Oh, we have that joint training Tuesday. Is that still right?
Yep.
I'm not gonna be able to attend that, but
That's the same night we're doing the truth and taxation. Sometimes reading a newspaper. On Tuesday, somewhere reading Tuesday night at 7 o'clock.
It's the Northview's Truth and Taxation.
Okay.
Right,
yeah. Ours was done a week ago, 8 days ago. Last night the council approved the budget.
That's what I thought. I read that. And wait a minute, huh?
Yeah, so it's Northview's. Council member Barker will be over at Northview's for that.
Now this one on Tuesday can be done by Zoom if needed.
It can be. It'll be an interesting conversation and I'm sure we could even follow up with additional questions.
Okay.
It's a new funding mechanism that banks and developers see as a great way to kind of help get stuff in.
Okay.
So.
anything you, Scott?
I was gonna note the training, but the other thing is, after kind of radio silence with Village of Prominence Point, we did meet with the developers and they've submitted their items that were pending for the development agreement to be approved. We have a couple of questions still on how they want to proceed with that. But we're also moving forward with, we should receive submittals in the next 3 weeks for the clubhouse, the first 3 apartment buildings, and there are 2 subdivisions that are needed to happen to permit those individual buildings. So it is moving forward. We're excited about that. And the developer was committing that they want to see dirt move on the clubhouse parcel before the apartment parcel to just meet that public's request and interest in having those amendments.
Okay, all right. Do you want to give motion to adjourn?
I motion we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.